People of Earth, we have come to upgrade your cosmic consciousness. DNA activation ready. In 3, 2, 1.
Hi, welcome to Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership. I'm Lou Quinto.
And I'm Craig Anderson.
Craig,
Lou.
you watching the Olympics?
No.
You didn't?
No, I don't think I watched more than 10 minutes of the Olympics.
Yeah, I have to say that in my entire lifetime, this is the very first time that I can honestly say I did not watch a single live event. I picked up some on the news and through live streaming, but I don't know. I wasn't there this year. I don't know what was going on, but it's just, I mean, I'm a big sports enthusiast, but I just had no desire to watch.
Well, all I know for sure is the last count I saw, and it wasn't a final count, but that the University of Florida, my alma mater, if it were a country, would be in the top 10 of medals received. So there's
Okay.
that. And I lied, Lou. I actually did see a full video clip of the U.S. Synchronized Swimming team doing their routine. So I did watch that just last night.
Synchronized swimming, great. We got track and field, and we have regular swimming, and we've got basketball and soccer, and you watch synchronized swimming.
And we finished fourth. We were robbed.
Oh, wow. Were we robbed? Okay. Well, while I wasn't watching the Olympics, I was doing a little reading. And particularly, we're at that situation a couple episodes ago we did on remote work. And I said, oh, no, not another remote work episode, only to find out 3 weeks after we taped it, that it looks like we may be doing remote work for a little bit longer. And so that light at the end of the tunnel apparently has gotten away from a lot of us, because I know with several of my larger clients, international clients, their return to work has been put on hold, and they've also instituted travel bans. So who knows what we're going to be doing here. But in my reading, I came across an article in the New York Times that says, okay, do chance meetings at the office boost innovation? You and I did back in December, we did a podcast on providing teams with unstructured collaboration time. And in there, we talked about ways in a remote situation that we could encourage that accidental engagement, if we can call it that, where people will be able to run into each other just like they were back at the office and have those synapses firing and all of those great ideas coming out. And now the New York Times in their business section had an article where they're questioning whether or not that really does happen.
Well, the reason it might not happen was that idea to have that big creepy video screen in the main lobby of the office.
Yeah, the hot wall.
Always on watching.
The hot wall.
The hot
where
wall.
People could tune in and they could be broadcast over the hot wall, so that someone was in the break room, they could say, hey, hi.
I think that idea has legs. I think that one is where we're going. Video screens.
Yeah. So I thought it would be a good thing for you and I to talk about, because it is one of those situations, particularly during the remote situation that we've been in, where people have said that has been one of the things that has been absent during the remote workforce. So let's do this. First of all, let's cover our three areas. First being, do people really have brainstorming sessions around a coffee pot in the break room? Because that's the primary area where we talk about boosting creativity during those chance meetings that we have with employees. The second one is, let's talk about groupthink, because that chance meeting, you've got that group think when you have regular meetings that takes place, and studies have shown that people are more creative when they're by themselves, not when they're in a group or with other people. And then the last one is, let's give our viewers and listeners some practical tips that you and I can share with them on how we believe it is best to standardize creativity and to promote creativity within the organization. So let me start with that first question there, Craig. Do people really have brainstorming sessions around coffee pots in the break room?
I don't know if they have coffee pot discussions around coffee pots in the break room. I think the difference is that kind of there's one thing I think we've really lost in this era of remote work is those meetings that happen, that in the discussions that happen in and out of rooms. So, you know, the Zoom call ends and the Zoom call ends.
Right.
But when you have 10 people around a table and we're leaving, there's all kinds of conversations that have come out of that meeting that are still being discussed. And I don't mean in the negative meeting after the meeting, but it's just the ongoing, hey, you know, Jane, I thought, you know, when you mentioned that had me thinking about this and this other problem that you and I have been talking about. And I think you're missing some of those very kind of one-off conversations that happen a lot when you're in person. And you even think about it, you know, from a lot of salespeople work in their associations around, you know, committees and stuff to get to know clients. Well, if you're not going to have those in-person meetings where you're going to come out of there and have those one-off chance conversations, I think a lot of these things start to get more difficult for people to just have. So I think there's some opportunities that are being missed because if I just plunk and the call's over, do I really want to, if I'm sitting there going, oh God, the last thing I want to do now is like Zoom back in and talk to Jane because I just got off the freaking call. So I think there is something that we are losing there by just having these abrupt ends to discussions in a way that we didn't used to have.
Yeah, but now see, you're going to get my meeting ire up here because the meeting manager in me would say, if you had a good meeting, that discussion would have happened in the meeting, not after the meeting. I would have told Jane, in your example, Jane, that's a great idea you brought up. I'd like to unpack that a little bit more and explore it. And why I think we're conditioned to not have that discussion with Jane during the meeting for some reason, and we want to take it offline. It's like you and I have joked before where a group will get together and make a decision and some people in the room won't say anything and the group makes their decision. And then when half the people walk out of the room, they're talking to themselves going, that is a horrible decision. I can't believe we're making this decision. And my comment has always been, why didn't you bring that up during the meeting?
But see, if we're the stickler in you towards staying on the agenda for the meeting, which has hash minutes and everything else, and we're staying very focused, this is a discussion that is spurred by an idea in the meeting that's not germane to the topic being discussed in the meeting. So now I'm walking out the door and that casual conversation, because by the way, it might be almost impossible for me to get on Jane's calendar because she's back-to-back meetings all day. And that small 5-minute window as we're both walking back is my opportunity. And I mean, I was in corporate America for 30 years. Trust me, that happens. That's when you can get your boss's ear or your boss's boss's ear. There's opportunities missed when we just pull a trigger and the call is over.
Okay, so let me ask this. The title of the article was, do chance meetings at the office boost innovation? So you brought up conversations, but my question to you was, did those conversations actually boost conversations or innovation rather, or did they just give you a chance to talk a little bit more and then it was dropped after that no matter what?
Well, you never know. I mean, a lot of times there were those, you know, if it was an innovative thought coming out of the meeting, it's entirely possible. You know, and I think it's interesting because the meeting had the article has this very narrow scope. Oh, well, because face-to-face doesn't increase innovation, screw it. Nobody ever needs to go to the office again. I mean, so we're taking like, hey, let's look at this little tiny example and extrapolate it to the whole world. I mean, there's so many flaws in that article. It's hard to even get started with them all. So, you know, is it innovation?
Although I will say this in all deference to the author of the article, it is something that has been discussed over the last 16 to 18 months of remote work is not providing those accidental engagements.
Right. And that's where I think it would be. And that's where I think we're missing things. So, And I think the author argument, unless I'm jumping ahead on the next point, well, I am, because I'll come back to it. I'll rant on the subject.
Yeah.
So
No,
whether it's innovation or not, I think there is something to be said for those opportunities for those generative things to happen in the context of those walking down the hallway meetings.
right. Yeah.
So yes, I think you're losing something. And she's wrong, flat out. Just like she took one example and extrapolated, as will I.
So you'll be wrong too, then. Is that what you're saying?
No.
No.
An exception that proves the rule.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. So since we're talking about creativity and innovation
Yep.
in an office setting, let's just go to, Irving Janis's groupthink concept that he came up with in 1972 that said when a group of people to get together, there are symptoms of groupthink that get the group thinking not as individuals, but as an entire group, which causes bad decisions to be made, lack of creativity, the lack of good problem solving and root cause analysis, because someone in the room, a powerful person in the room, someone who may be a subject matter expert, or someone who just tends to dominate a room, will get the group thinking in the direction that they are, which forces them to ignore everything else. And so studies have shown, because when creativity and brainstorming particularly became a process in business, which was back in the 1940s, when it was developed in an ad agency, as a matter of fact. And in fact, if you go back and you look at the I'll call it prehistoric history of brainstorming, there was a flow chart that had like 16 different boxes on it that had arrows pointing, if you do this, then you go here, and then now brainstorming is, here's our problem. What ideas do you have? We've gone down to 2 boxes. Just talk about the problem and then just throw crap at the wall. And we put those ideas up there. And so it was originally thought that brainstorming, because you had people from different expertise, different disciplines, different backgrounds, would get together and they'd come up with very rich and thorough ideas that then could be taken and looked at implementing. Innovation, creativity, come up with the ideas, innovation, implement the ideas. Right. And then Yale did a study back in, I was going to say, it wasn't shortly after brainstorming really became a business rage, but Yale did a study and found that people tend to be more creative by themselves than in a group with other individuals. So it makes me think that these accidental or chance meetings, is it really boosting creativity if studies actually point that people are more creative by themselves? So why do we need these chance meetings?
I guess we don't.
Okay. Oh, long pause there, but okay.
Well, look, I mean, you can come up with a lot of creative ideas sitting in your room by yourself, but you're also limited by the limits of your own experience.
Correct.
You don't know all the things that are possible, and you may not even be deep enough in the subject to really get creative to think, when you really understand something, you can kind of push the boundaries of what's in there. But, it's great if everybody's sitting in their little boxes coming up with creative ideas, then what are we going to do? We're all just going to put them up and vote on them in a poll on Facebook or something?
On the hot wall.
On the hot wall, yeah.
We can advertise them on the hot wall, that big screen in the break room where you can put stuff.
Yeah, and so, all right, so, even if we accept the argument that, creativity is best done alone, then what are we going to do with all those ideas? At some point, those ideas have to come up for discussion. You're not just going to have a bunch of independent people come up and then we're just going to innovate 55 different ideas. So I think that's just another hole in the article. It says, all right, fine, let's assume people do that. Where do we go from there? Right. But there's a lot to be said where people are riffing off other people's ideas. And I think that's a lot of what we do, no matter how bastardized apparently the brainstorming process has become since the purity of the 40s. Right. But, there's a lot where people riff, say, but what if? Right. And if, because we all have to do the whole thing where we don't say but anymore. We go, and if, right. Now, and on top of your stupid idea. And so there is that opportunity where I think you get that kind of generative ideas bubbled up. And really, if we're worried about groupthink and one or two people taking over, how's that going to be any different if it's all on a Zoom call? I mean, in my experience, the people who talked a lot in the office and shut everybody down in a conference room, they're doing the exact same thing in the Zoom call. It's just easy to snark about them in the chat room.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you're not sitting on your phone texting at the conference table about that. Now you're actually like just doing it right in the chat and hoping you don't make a mistake.
Hope you do it as a private chat and not to all.
Do not expand it to the world.
Yeah, do not expand it to the world. Okay. Yeah, you know, and it goes back, and again, yeah, we're go back. Let's go prehistoric times in business. When the Manhattan Project was going on at NYU University, they had this building. I think it was like Building 37, not to be confused with Area 57 out in New Mexico. But it was designed, and this goes back to our conversations about that open office environment and everything else, but it was designed so that people from different areas would intentionally or unintentionally bump into each other because they were not all in their individual groups, their silos. And so people had to walk from different places to other places, and they would run into each other. That was truly the design behind that. And that's where a lot of this accidental engagement comes from. And so I'm wondering, are we still trying to apply 1950 technology, business technology to 2021?
I don't know if I would say it's business technology that we're trying to apply. I think we're talking about the ideas that we as humans want to be in community with other humans, despite the fact that I have my groceries delivered and my laundry delivered and everything I do to avoid people, apparently. But in general, normal people, not me, desire community, right? There is that value to that comfort level, right? Where you get to know people. Another aspect I think we haven't talked about in creativity is you're not going to spout out a bunch of creative off the wall ideas in front of people you don't know, like, and trust for the most part.
That's part of group. That's part of a symptom of groupthink called peer pressure, where somebody's in the room, you don't know them, and so you've got this internal psychological pressure that, oh, I don't want to embarrass myself in front of this person, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
So we're just going to exacerbate that, you know. So I would submit we are going to make that even worse because we don't have those opportunities over the coffee pot in the break room to have that discussion, right? So I don't get to know my colleagues because I only jump in from time to time. So I think there's some danger to it. Now, look, some of this is just for the sake of the argument. I ran mostly remote teams for most of my career. I mean, in sales, all my people were working remotely for the most part. I had my core group of people that were in the office, and then I had everybody who was remote too. You know, so it was like sometimes as much as half and half. Yeah. Although other times there's like almost everybody that worked for me I never saw every day. And you miss, I think, you know, there's something you miss in not seeing people every day, just in building those relationships over time. And even if I do want to have lunch with you on the occasion I'm in the same city you are, that's not the same as building a relationship, right? And I think we're missing some of those opportunities that do drive innovation, that do drive creativity, because I know the people around me. Okay. And that's where I think we start to run into some problems with some of the things that were presented in the article.
Okay. Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to create another episode here that we could talk about this, but also you have to think about it. You and I grew up in an environment where we were right with each other. Our kids, your kids, my kids, their relationships, let's face it, are on this phone. On this phone is where their relationships are. They can be in the same room as somebody and they're texting them. So as we move forward, are those accidental encounters actually going to have any value, since we've got a generation of people, well, millennials, they say the next 3 years, millennials will dominate over 50% of the workforce. And the Zoomers, Generation Z, is coming in right behind them. And they are digital natives. Their relationships have been established, they're maintained, they're deepened through technology. So I
would add we think. The jury is out. This is something in the whole scope of human history and relationship. This is a 20-year-old science, if even that, right? Or over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So we don't know that that is actually more effective. We just know it's more predominant.
Well,
Right?
exactly. I'm not saying it's effective. I'm saying that that's what they grew up with, and
Yep.
they have adapted their lifestyles toward that.
Yeah.
And just like you and I can't teach an old dog new tricks, it's going to be tough to force them to stand around that coffee pot and talk to people. Walk down the hallway and bump into people and talk to them about your business.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's really something that we should be considering as a pitfall, obstacle of remote work, because I believe you have a lot of people who they are just fine with this technology. As I've told people over the last year, this ain't going away. In fact, if anything, this technology, you and I are on Zoom right now, it is just going to increase. And it's, this is going to explode and become our business modem for not all of what we do, but I think, significant part moving forward. So again, that's it. That's a whole nother conversation. But going back to the problem, we want to increase creativity and innovation within a company. So we've talked about the problem. We've beat it up in the last couple minutes. Let's provide our listeners and viewers, what are some solutions that if they want to increase or boost the innovation, as the title to this article says, what are some standard things that they can do from our perspective that will help them to be able to boost innovation, even though we don't have these chance encounters anymore? So I'm going to start with you.
I will say, and this is actually something I took some question from the article too, where he said, oh yeah, the people in the more creatives are doing just fine working remote and having creative ideas, except most of the creatives I've spoken with are struggling with being creative. So we've talked before, Lou, right? This is all just pendulum swinging. I think we're going to come back to some sort of midpoint. Maybe it's still a little off to one side, where we still are going to want to have either in-person activities to do some brainstorming and do the creativity and do some of those sessions, or we're going to further upgrade the technology so it feels like we are, right? So either it feels like we're in the room with somebody, or we're going to want to be in the room with somebody to start driving some of these things. And maybe it's just the beginning of the process and we come back again 6 weeks later at the close of the process. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that to get us started, it's good to have everybody in the same room. And, these problems about groupthink and everything else, we're all working on that all the time anyway, right? I mean, we sit there and try and mitigate that when we're both running strategy meetings for groups, right? We see the big talker and we do everything we can to say, okay.
Does anyone else have anything?
Does anyone else have anything? Or do we just have to ask this guy to leave the room so you all can talk?
Hey, Bob, here's $10. Go to the movie for the next 3 hours.
Play some video games, Bob, just to date myself even further. So I think we may find, especially in those areas that are really creative. Now, look, if you're just doing hunched over work, crunching numbers on a spreadsheet, or doing doing things that you can just do in isolation and probably are better done in isolation, 100%. I think those things make sense. I'm not ready to accept as writ that there's more value in doing this stuff remotely. I think look, I mean, why do people put articles in the paper to get read? So we'll take an extreme position like me here. So I think we're going to see kind of a mixing of it. And I think that's probably what you want to do, is try and have those opportunities. But one way or another, you got to do it pure, because what you can't do is have 6 people around the table and 2 people on the phone, or 2 people on a Zoom, because that, I think, actually will clamp down on creativity. So I think you're either all in or you're all out.
Yeah, I've experienced with some people in on, they're dialing in remotely while the rest of us are live in the last couple months. And it's almost like we forget that they're there. Yeah. And they have the opportunity then to be sociably lazy and do work that they need to get done before this meeting is over, so that they can stay on time on a project. So yes, I agree. All in or all out. Let me give you just a few tips. Go back to the basics of, if you want to be creative, here's some things to do. 1, make sure that when you have a meeting where brainstorming is going to be used, that you want creative ideas, that you follow some of the basics of brainstorming. Number one, any idea that you create in a brainstorming session should not be judged or dismissed in that same meeting. You need to go out and you need to gather data, gather facts, bring it back, and then you can make a true determination of whether or not an idea is good or not, because you have facts and data, as opposed to having Bob in the back of the room when we start reviewing ideas go, nope, that'll cost too much money. And no one wants to have any conflict with Bob, so we just cross it off the list because Bob said so. And so go back to that basic of any idea you come up with in a meeting, you do not judge it in that same meeting because you don't have the data and facts to prove it. The second thing when it comes to creativity is to ensure that everybody has input in that idea generation. Don't let somebody go where they're not saying anything, because they may have the best ideas, but they've got this peer pressure that they're dealing with that they're not going to say anything. So apply things, techniques like using affinity diagramming, where people can just give everyone a sticky pad and let them write ideas up and stick it on, on a board so that it is being done anonymously, or what we call the nominal group technique brainstorming, where everyone leaves the room, where we can apply the concept of everyone is creative on their own. They do their brainstorming on their own, and then they come back and everybody reads what's on their list. So now everything your ideas have been generated without any pressure, just again, mental pressure of being in that room. And so those are two techniques that if you want to increase or boost your creativity, your innovation, that you can do even in a Zoom meeting. So it doesn't need to be in an in-person meeting. So that's my two suggestions if we want to boost creativity and innovation. So what are your key takeaways based on the article in the New York Times of do chance meetings at the office boost innovation? ? There's no evidence of it.
Well, one, there's no evidence for it either in that article, by the way, right? There's no case proving that it's somehow better the other way.
Correct.
Just
Correct.
a lot of basically statements that it's worse. So
Yes.
That's one. Two, fire Bob. Bob is apparently a big source of the problems from what we've identified here today.
Yes.
And
if you've got a Bob on your team, get rid of Bob.
If you got a Bob, hi Bob. Sorry. Three, and more seriously, let's not start leaping to conclusions about what's better after 1 year. And granted, I know I'm old and I have time compression issues, and a year seems much less time to me than it does to somebody in their 20s. Excuse me. But let's not just assume because this one big, variant 18 months we're going through, that everything we've done is better. It's just different. So I think let's take some perspective on it. Let's take from it what we can. Let's see what else we can see, and then let's make decisions. Let's not throw the whole thing out right here.
Okay. And my key takeaway is if your company is depending on chance meetings for creativity and innovation, you aren't going to go anywhere fast. So if you want to boost your innovation and creativity, my key takeaway is you need to have structured meetings that incorporate good creativity generating processes to be able to get those ideas. Again, if you're depending on chance meetings, it ain't going to happen. That's my key takeaway.
All right. Very good. Well, if you like this episode, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about it. You can catch all our episodes at qaleadership.com and on all your favorite social media like Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And we are now on all your favorite podcasting platforms. So just go out there, search for Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership, and you will have the blessing of listening to us without actually having to look at us. So until next time, I'm Craig Anderson.
And keep your hands washed, keep your distance, wear a mask, and get a vaccine. I'm Lou Quinto.